At 6, I told my parents I wanted to be in tech. At 10, I moved to the United States. A month after turning 16, I graduated from high school. I was the youngest person in every room I walked into, doing things that people years ahead of me hadn't done yet. And I didn't feel like I deserved any of it. Not a single accomplishment felt real to me. I would achieve something genuinely hard, something actually difficult. And before I could sit in it, my brain would move to the next thing. And not the next best thing, but the next thing I wasn't good at. The next person I wasn't as good as, the next room I hadn't walked into, and the next room I would walk into and get found out. And the wild part is no one put that pressure on me. I did, at 6 years old. At that time and in that age, I knew one thing and only one thing to be true. I had to be the best. Not good, not average, not okay, unreachable. I wanted to be the person no one could come close to, the kid that was envied, the one you would try so hard to be like, but never actually be like. So I took that standard into meetings, into classrooms, into rooms, even the ones that I created myself. And no matter what I walked in with, 3 questions plagued my mind. Who's smarter? Who's more prepared? And unfortunately, who actually belongs here? Because according to me, I didn't. I wasn't measuring efforts, I was measuring outcomes. And I measured them against people whose lives I have never seen, whose processes I wasn't a part of. Then my first semester came and it hit me like a bus. I spent my whole life being the smartest, the best, the first choice, the only choice, your best option, the most improved, the only improved. And suddenly I was sitting in a classroom and realizing I don't know anything about anything. Not the way I thought I did. And for the 6-year-old who thought she was unreachable and no one could stop her and she was the one no one else could come close to, I was devastated. So what did I do? I hesitated. It didn't matter what happened. I waited until I felt absolutely ready to move. I never failed publicly because that's shameful. I looked for shortcuts because I didn't trust myself enough to go the slow way. Not because I was lazy, no. Because I was scared. For the first time ever, Salem Alonge was genuinely scared. But then something clicked. I wasn't behind, I was just untrained. Nobody ever told me how to sit in confusion and let it rest, how to not run away from problems that you have, how to practice instead of just perform. So every time I struggled, I made it mean something about me instead of realizing that it was part of my success story. I had been collecting achievements and I hadn't built anything. So I started. I stopped hesitating. I stopped waiting until I felt ready, still uncomfortable, still unsure, still convinced I didn't belong. I built systems. Small, repeatable things that I could actually show up for. Ways to get better, not just look better. And the results started to show. Not because I grew talents overnight, but because I was consistent. I followed through. And then the leadership, the opportunities, they came. But they didn't come from perfection. They came from process. And in that time, I thought, how many people are carrying what I'm carrying? Maybe you're in a high-pressure environment. Maybe you've already done things that should feel impressive, and they don't. Maybe you've been the youngest, the first, the best, the only. And you think that your problem is your ability. Well, shocker, it's not. No one gave you a process. They just gave you a standard and assumed you'd figure your way out of it. But here's what I've come to understand. That is not a character flaw. It's a gap. And like every gap you see, it can be filled. Because growth is not a gift, and that gap is filled in growth. It's not a gift that people get from being born. No, it's a skill, and skills are built. So it's built in moments where you don't feel ready, where you don't want to start, but you start anyway, where consistency takes over comfort, when you stop trying to prove something and actually start trying to learn something. That is where the gap is filled. So again, at 6, I told my parents I wanted to be in tech. And at 10, I left everything I knew and loved and moved to the United States. At 16, I graduated, the youngest in the room again. And none of it felt like it mattered, because I was so focused on being ahead, I never actually learned how to grow. So if you're like me, and you've done everything right and still feel behind, you didn't miss anything. They never handed anything out. You're not behind, you're simply untrained. And like that, unlike talent, unlike timing, unlike the head start that you think everyone else got, that is something you can actually do something about.